Good evening. I'm Dana Kelly with Contractor Hanford Mission Integration Solutions, and we thank you for joining tonight's virtual public meeting. This meeting is being recorded. Amber has added that note in the chat for us, and it's just a reminder, normally on Teams, we show a red recording line at the top. We don't have that technology available to us, but we are recording, and we'll post this out as soon as we can get it rendered and on the Hanford.gov events calendar. So tonight's event is about a Class 2 permit modification to the dangerous waste permit. It's for both the liquid effluent retention facility basins and the effluent treatment facility. This modification would update Addendum D, the groundwater monitoring plan. Tonight's meeting is part of a 60-day public comment period. It began March 29th and ends May 28th. So we'll need your comments to us by the evening of May 28th, please. A few quick technical details before we begin. Tonight we will be using the chat box feature in Microsoft Teams. If you click on that icon, it's the one that looks like a thought bubble, and it's up on the top next to the hand icon. How do you submit your comments and the evaluation link? Those will be in the chat. For those on Hanford.gov, you can find the content on the events calendar. Now for our participants who called in using the telephone only, you are muted. When you want to unmute to ask a question, and once we get through the presentation and get to the Q&A, I will call for you. And then you press *6 to unmute, and then *6 again to go back onto mute. If you need to step away from the call, please don't put the call on hold. Just hang back up and call back in later when you're free. And you can submit questions at any time using the chat box. Please indicate if you'd like us to read your question or if you'd like to read it out loud yourself. If you have multiple questions, please save them until the end, and that way everyone will have an opportunity as we go around to get at least one question asked. And now let's turn the time over to DOE's Richard Valle, and we have Doug Hildebrandt joining us tonight as well.
All right,
Richard.
Good evening, everybody. Yep, can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfectly. And I'm going to turn the camera off and go back on mute. Thank you.
Sounds good, no problem. So as mentioned, everybody, my name is Richard Valle. I work for the Department of Energy, in particular the Office of River Protection. You can see here there's another name listed, a colleague of mine, Doug Hildebrandt, and I'll allow him to introduce himself in a second. He works for a different office, the Regional Operations Office, but just to provide some context on why you're seeing two names here, today we'll be discussing a facility in question where the Office of River Protection has primary oversight responsibilities, and I'll be providing some background on that side, the facility perspective. And then we'll transition through the slide deck, and at one point we'll hand it over to Doug Hildebrandt, and he will talk to the groundwater monitoring program that he and his contractor help manage on our behalf. So Doug, did you want to say an introduction? You may be muted, Doug.
So, Doug Hildebrandt, work for the Office of Richland Operations Office, and I work in the Soil and Groundwater Division and take care of a lot of the RECRA monitoring, working towards getting the final status groundwater monitoring plans in place.
Perfect, thank you, Doug. And with that, again, just wanted to provide context on seeing two names here. We can move on to the next slide. Okay, for those that have been able to join us in the recent past, we do always take the opportunity to try to highlight one of the main priorities ongoing here at the Hanford site, and that's the direct feed low activity waste configuration. You'll hear that referred to as DF law. So we'll take a couple moments on taking that opportunity here as well. So it's through DF law that DOE will integrate a select number of individual projects, facilities, and infrastructure upgrades, all in an effort to retrieve, treat, and immobilize low activity waste into glass. So if we take a few moments just to talk through the graphic that's in front of us, we'll start at the AP tank farm. That's called out in orange at the top center of the screen. That is the double shell tank farm that will store the waste prior to pretreatment. The pretreatment will occur at the tank site cesium removal that you can see called out to you in the blue call out on the top left. And so the tank site cesium removal system, or TSCR, will remove solids and cesium and pretreat the waste. We can see an orange flow path leaving the AP tank farm and entering the waste treatment and immobilization plant footprint. And ultimately that orange flow path terminates there at the low activity waste facility, or the LAW facility. And that is where we will take that pretreated waste and actually make glass. If we follow the glass waste stream for a moment, we now have glass waste that is disposed of at the integrated disposal facility, transported and disposed of at the integrated disposal facility, or IDF. Sorry?
So in the chat, I hopefully put the correct link. I checked it, it is working.
Someone not on mute.
Somebody that's not on mute.
Flip you over to the correct page. I'm not sure what.
Excuse me, I hear some background chatter. Is there someone whose mic is open?
Looks like it's fixed now, so no problem. That's the virtual environment we live in. So again, we made glass at the low activity waste, the LAW facility, and then transported and disposed of it at the integrated disposal facility. That's the purple call out in the top left. And so we kind of ran through the life of the waste through glass and disposal. But we do want to focus our attention back at the low activity waste, the LAW facility, and recognize that there is a white flow path exiting that facility. And you can see that is due to liquid effluent that is generated as a function of the glass making process. So by creating glass, we are also generating a secondary or a liquid effluent waste stream. That is then routed to the effluent management facility, where we hope to reduce down the volume of that liquid effluent that's generated through the use of evaporation. And then ultimately, the waste that remains after evaporation follows that longer white flow path, leaving the waste treatment and immobilization plant footprint, and then routing to the facility that we'll be discussing tonight. And that is the grouping that is the liquid effluent retention facility, or Lerf, and the effluent treatment facility, and ETF. And we'll discuss those in the next slide in some more detail. Okay, next slide, please. So the prior slide put a lot of that in a graphic narrative. This slide kind of reiterates some of the salient points that we'd want you to take away, at least for the purposes of tonight's discussion. And that is, again, reiterating that chemical and radioactive waste is stored here on the Hanford site. That's indicated as shown to you in that graphic below, where the typical tank contents will typically contain a liquid or blue fraction and a solid or yellow fraction, as shown in the graphic. And it's through the DF law that we will be treating the liquid fraction of the tank waste. And again, that will be done through safe, efficient, and effective manner using DF law to immobilize or vitrify that liquid waste fraction into glass. As part of the glass making process, the secondary liquid waste stream will be generated. We talked about that prior. That will occur during DF law. And we will be using the liquid effluent retention facility, or Lerf, and 200 area ETF to manage that remaining secondary liquid waste stream that is generated. So next slide, please. Still providing some background context, in this case, some of the regulatory framework that we're working under. We just want to point out that the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, or RCRA, provides Hanford with a dangerous waste permit that is used to govern dangerous waste treatment, storage, and disposal here on site. The Washington State Department of Ecology is our regulator, and we're currently operating under the issued revision 8C of that permit. And we, DOE, and in this particular case, our contractor being Washington River Protection Solutions, are the permittees, and we are proposing a Class 2 permit for this facility grouping. Again, that is the Lerf and 200 area ETF. sometimes referred to as operating unit group 3 in our permit. Next slide, please. So this begins a series of slides that kind of starts at a high level and drills down to a much lower level, but this one being the start of the high level, we just wanted to provide some context on where the facility is actually located. So within the Hanford site in the state of Washington, we see the middle of your screen there has the 200 area. There's the 200 West and 200 East. This facility is located on the 200 East in the general location of the call out shown to you there in white. Next slide, please. So again, I've mentioned a few times that these facilities are usually mentioned as a pair or as a group, them being the Lerf and the 200 area ETF. If we just take a moment to look at the graphic, we see the actual liquid effluent retention facility, or Lerf, and that's a series of basins that the next slide will kind of get into a lot more detail. But they are comprised of a series of basins, and you can see the general aerial view shown in the graphic. And then down below on the graphic, you see the effluent treatment facility and its series of buildings and structures associated with the effluent treatment facility. And it's these facilities that work to store, treat, and dispose of large volumes of liquid waste. And again, worth reiterating that we will be receiving a new waste stream upon startup of DFLAW operations from WTP. Next slide, please. Okay, and then we are at the last slide that provides kind of the lower level detail of the facility that we'll be focusing on tonight for tonight's discussion, and that's the Lerf, again, the liquid effluent retention facility. It's this facility that provides interim storage for large volumes of liquid waste prior to treatment, that treatment again occurring at ETF. Currently consists of 4 RCRA permitted surface impoundments or basins. From the graphic, you can see 3 of the 4 basins are existing and in use, and the 4th basin is being installed, basin 41. Each of these basins will have a permitted storage capacity of about 7.8 million gallons each. And right now they are grouped to contain similar waste streams, and those waste streams include processed condensates, so the condensed overheads from evaporator processes, leachates, as well as other miscellaneous waste streams. And again, just reiterating, we will be receiving a WTP DFLAW effluent upon startup of DFLAW operations in the near future. Next slide, please. So it's at this, at this point, I think I'll hand it over to you, Doug, and we'll get into some of the specifics for the proposed permit modification.
Yeah, so the purpose for this proposed permit modification is to incorporate revised groundwater monitoring plan for the Lerf that accommodates the acceptance of the waste treatment liquid effluent. It's a new waste stream, has some new constituents to look for, and provides for monitoring of basin 41. Changes to the Lerf groundwater monitoring plan include the following updates to the monitoring constituents. Incorporates monitoring constituents for the new waste stream, adds some indicator constituents, and adds 2 years to the sampling of the new wells. We do a background sampling on a quarterly basis on a 2-year cycle, so we have 8 samples to establish kind of the background. Next slide, please. Other changes to the Lerf groundwater monitoring plan include the following. It incorporates 2 new compliance wells to monitor the area down gradient in basin 41. We're removing well 299 E2677. We will retain it for water levels, but we won't sample for constituents. And it resides on the on the west side, somewhat of the west side of basin 41 is the general location. So it incorporates incorporation of one of the compliance wells to monitor the area down gradient of basin 44 after the first year of sampling, which is indicated by the red box in the lower right part of the figure. Next slide, please. Other changes include the following: revised So because we have 20 some of these RECWA final status plans, we've adopted a template in general language. So we're trying to keep them consistent as much as we can, but vary as they need to. So the template language, technical content and format, and again, reformatted for consistency with the other final status permit groundwater monitoring plans at the Hanford site. We removed information that is provided in the engineering evaluation report. We revised the stratigraphy, hydrology, and groundwater flow sections. The Appendix A has been updated to the current standards for QA. Appendix B has the sampling protocol. And Appendix C has the well construction for the network. Any of the new wells, we add those well constructions to that slide. Next slide, please. And I think this is where I turn it back to you, Rich.
Yep, thank you, Doug. So in summary, we are proposing a modification to our existing RCRA permit for this particular operating unit group, again, consisting of Lerf and 200 area ETF. And the folks familiar with this particular section of the permit note that we use addenda to describe the Lerf and 200 area ETF. So we have modified addendum D within this section of the permit for the groundwater monitoring plan, and we have also modified the unit-specific permit conditions. And the details associated with the modification and the proposed permit language are available, and we would encourage the public to refer to the Hanford Dangerous Waste Permit Change Notice for a full description of the changes. Next slide, please. And just wrapping it up in summary, we wanted to reiterate the permit modification public process. So we mentioned a few times earlier, this is a Class 2 permit modification for this grouping of facilities, the Lerf and 200 area ETF. It has its own 60-day public comment period that is currently open and will run through May 28th. And we are accepting comments through multiple means. The electronic means through the hyperlink shown down below is preferred. You can certainly submit physical mail through the address shown below as well. And I think with that, the next slide will allow for any questions that may be had.
All right, you just heard from DOE's Richard Valle and Doug Hildebrand, and thank you both for presenting. And for those of you on the line, we thank you for participating. We will check in with Amber. And do we have anyone with a question in the chat, Amber?
Nope, we do not.
Is there anyone on the phone line who would like to ask a question? It's *6 to unmute. Oh, I see Matthew Campbell from the Umatillas with his hand raised. Matthew, can you hit *6 to unmute and go ahead, please?
Hi, thank you. I had a question in regards to it adding indicator constituents to the permit. What exactly are the indicator constituents? Can you remind me, please?
So the indicator constituents like pH specific conductance, TOC, total organic carbon specific conductance.
Okay. Okay, organic carbon. All right, and those are the two things that are added, and that's it?
Yeah, there's specific conductance, total organic carbon, I think total halogens.
Total halogens, okay. Okay, thank you, Doug.
Hey, Dana, you're muted.
Thank you. Just for your awareness, it does look like the link to this events calendar meeting might have broken. When we made it, it checked out, but we're noticing that there has been some technical difficulties. So if you have the link you're on now and you can share that out with others, we'd appreciate it. We apologize about any inconvenience. And are there any other questions? Anybody on the phone can hit *6 to unmute. And anyone else in chat, Amber?
There was just Matthew Campbell with his hand raised, and that was all.
He asked his question. All right, at this point, I'm going to just assume that we don't have a lot of questions because we have a broken link, but we still have some time here. Are there any other comments that DOE would like to share, or any other thoughts our regulators would like to share?
This is John Temple with the Department of Ecology. Nothing at this time, but I will note that we are still performing our review of the formal submittal.
Thank you, John. All right. Any other thoughts or comments in the room?
Is Dan Solik on the line?
Dan Solis, are you on the line? Star 6 to unmute.
Maybe give him a couple minutes.
All right, just checking one more time. We don't see any more questions in the chat. And are there any other callers who have a question?
So this is Doug. So I'll make a correction. So I double checked. I'm used to the interim status monitoring plans, and the indicator parameters tend to be specific conductance and pH. But in this final status plan, our indicator parameters are on table D4, and it's ammonia, bromide, and nitrate. So I misspoke first. Sorry about that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the correction. Now, as a conclusion, tonight's meeting is being recorded. Once we render that, we'll get that uploaded to YouTube and posted to the bottom of the events calendar. That's where you'll also find the fact sheet. That's where you can submit your comments, and that's where tonight's presentation is available. And let's just make sure we have one more call to go around the room. If there are any other questions, please just go ahead and hit star 6 to unmute, or drop your question in the chat box, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have. All right, then. Our apologies for the broken link. I'm not sure exactly what happened there, but we'll be all over that and make sure that doesn't happen again. So on behalf of DOE, we want to thank you for joining us tonight. We'll have details about how to submit your comments. They're in the chat. Amber's placed that there. And then, of course, we are looking forward to getting your feedback on this meeting. We'd welcome that. There's a link to the evaluation in the chat box. And we want to thank you for attending. We always appreciate your participation and your comments, and we wish you a wonderful evening. Thank you.